Happy Thursday. This is Christopher Dale with Glen Oak Escrow, and they're to go to escrow, officer that I always use, and he makes my life so much easier. How are you, Christopher?
I'm well, Sean. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So the reason we want to do this interview is obviously there are a lot of clients that have bought or sold, many years ago. There might be first-time buyers, there might be first-time sellers, or it may have been a while since they've sold their home, and I know that some of the processes have changed. So I thought it might be informative to go over the process, before we open escrow, after we open escrows, talk a little bit about escrow expenses and charges and things like that. Obviously not numbers, but just itemizing certain things that is
sure.
And then whatever you want to add to it, that would be great.
Love to be here. I'm happy to assist and provide any information.
Perfect. So one of the nice services that Christopher always helps me out with is, even before we go into escrow, I always ask him for a seller's net sheet. And this is for my listings. And it's because it gives a pretty good idea to my sellers what their net proceeds would be, and give them an idea of what are some of the expenses. And I appreciate doing that, and they love it. So Christopher, tell us, what are some of those items that are included? I know they're estimates, and obviously during escrow it might change, but just tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. So the net sheet, it's a great tool that our clients really love, like you mentioned. And the net sheet gives just a good breakdown of all the anticipated charges for any home sale. So obviously, based on the purchase price, there are some variable charges. Settlement charges like the title and escrow fees are based upon that ultimate sales price, just as the commissions are. And that net sheet will break down all of the costs that are associated with the sale and include things that are typical and customary in our marketplace, like homeowners association document and transfer fees, prorated property taxes based upon the closing date, as well as home warranty plans or things of that nature. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of variable charges, and it gives a great picture from incoming sales price all the way down to what the seller will walk away with at the end of the transaction. And like you said, it gives them a great idea of what they're going to net, so they can make plans for their future.
There we go. Exactly. And that net sheet, just FYI, everyone, includes the seller's agent's commission, and also we call it the selling agent's commission, but a lot of times we say buyer's agent. So it will include all of that. And you said something about HOA transfer. Can you explain that? Because I know they changed it. A lot of times the sellers are now paying for that almost all the time. But can you tell us what that is?
Certainly. So anytime that a property has at least one, or sometimes two, and in some cases even three homeowners associations, those can add up. But the association will charge two separate items. They'll charge something called an HOA document fee, and that is a negotiable item that can be negotiated during the offer process between the buyer and the seller. And actually, excuse me, the document fee is not negotiable. The transfer fee is negotiable. So the document fee, it's required to be paid by the seller, and it covers the cost to order a fresh set of association documents that are current. So the new homeowner has all the information needed for current financials, meeting minutes, anything that might impact the property, its financial health for the association, that the buyer will want to know. So that document fee, I usually estimate about $350 to $400 per association, just for the document fee. Now, the transfer fee, as I mentioned, is negotiable, and that is, again, commonly charged to the seller. That's what's current in our marketplace, customary. And that also is anywhere between $350 and $400. And it covers the costs for the association's management company to transfer the ownership from the seller to the buyer on their side.
Perfect. Exactly. I know a lot of times sellers are, surprised that they have to pay that. And it used to be negotiable, right? The document, the cost for the ordering the documents, but now it's really written as a standard in the RPA that I will have to pay. Perfect. Okay, so let's say we have an accepted offer. Let's talk about the seller side first.
Sure.
I have an accepted offer, and I open escrow with you, or my transaction coordinator does that, and tell us what are the each steps. And I think we had said, I know that there's some documents I can share that document, or if you want to just tell us about it, that would be great too, whichever you want.
Sure. So I have a great flyer that Sean can provide her viewers with that kind of outlines the seller and buyer process of a typical escrow. Mm-hmm. But in regards to the seller, as we begin, we always reach out to our clients with an introductory email to introduce ourselves as the escrow company and give our clients this flyer, which is the what to expect during the escrow period. This is a great piece as it breaks down the process into 4 parts. The opening process is where I, as the escrow holder, start gathering information from the seller, the buyer. I reach out to the title company and I do a complete due diligence search on the home just to make sure that the contract is executed by the person who owns it. And then I also collaborate with the buyer at that time to arrange the delivery of the earnest money deposit. And that deposit is usually due by wire transfer within 3 business days of the acceptance, unless it's otherwise negotiated. And while we're working out all those details and getting the information from all parties, I'm beginning to build a foundation for our paperwork, preparing escrow instructions and ordering association documents from the HOAs, and then collaborating with our realtor partners and the buyer's lender to start disclosures and things of that nature. So
I'm going to stop you right there. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's a really important thing that I want to ask you. It's about wiring money to escrow account, wiring that earnest deposit money. Can you stress to our clients? I know that I always tell my clients, you need to call the escrow officer, even if you got an email that has escrow instructions, even if it's, I know that you do it encrypted and you know what I mean? They have to log in and things like that, but it is how important it is to verify that it's, this email has not been interrupted by somebody else and you actually wire and get into the right escrow account.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. So wire fraud is a major issue, not only, in the real estate space, but across any of the financial sectors. So we always urge our clients, in our introductory emails, we say, be on the lookout for wire fraud. And these are things to look out for. We work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and we get information from them on tips of wire fraud and the new schemes that are coming out. So we always fine tune our process. So, our buyers and sellers funds are protected. Ultimately, our role as an escrow officer is to protect money and the information with which we are gathering. So beyond sending an encrypted message, which will be password protected and shared in a separate message, our buyers are also encouraged to call us before sending in the funds. And that's to at least establish a voice-to-voice rapport with me as the escrow officer, so they know who they're speaking with, who they'll be wiring money to. And then they know, okay, this is a legitimate person. It's not someone, who is pretending to be an escrow company or officer. And that's unfortunately some things that happen. There are even cases where buyers and sellers have been emailed using lender emails or even realtor emails where their emails have been spoofed or hacked, and they'll substitute, pretend wiring instructions. So we even educate the buyer on what that looks like, so they're aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that earnest deposit money can be either wired or it could be like a not money order, but a check that they drop off at the office, correct?
It could be a personal check, a cashier's check, or a wire transfer. The contract defaults to a wire transfer. So for us to accept any other form of payment, the appropriate box in, I think it's 3A1 of the contract needs to be marked. So if it says personal check, I can accept a personal check.
Perfect.
Same thing for a cashier's check.
Okay, perfect. Okay, go ahead. Now you can keep on. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, no worries at all. So now we've got the deposit in our example here, and we're going to move on to the next step, which is the processing of the file. And that means preparation and delivery of the escrow instructions to both buyer and seller. And we send those out digitally to our clients using DocuSign where applicable. There are a few forms that require live signature or completion, and for the sellers, notarization as well. So we'll email those over, instructing them exactly what to do with the paperwork, printing and signing in the presence of a notary. And then I also include a return FedEx envelope so they can just, print that envelope, stick it in a FedEx box, and it comes back to me securely and quickly. Simultaneously, while that's being done, we're also working with any vendors on the file, like a termite company. If those reports come in and are required, the title company at this point would have provided me their preliminary title report, and I'll do a thorough review from start to finish, just making sure that there are no title issues that would preclude us from closing escrow. So if there were any liens or judgments on the preliminary title report, I would work with the seller to resolve those issues and provide the buyer with an accounting of what we're doing to resolve them and when to expect resolution.
And that includes the solar, right?
That was just about to say.
Perfect. Sorry.
Yeah. So no, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So in the event of a solar lien against the property, we would need to be told by the seller if it's leased or financed or wholly owned. Yeah. And depending on the solar company, every vendor has their own specific requirements. They don't all follow the same process.
Right.
So some companies will allow us as the escrow company to shepherd the buyer and seller through that process. Right. Some, like Tesla, for instance, they won't let us get involved at all. We just receive, once the buyer and seller have done their part, they will send us the documentation, and that's our involvement. So knowing what we know about each vendor and the process, we will, reach out to the realtors and the seller and let them know, hey, we can help, or hey, the seller and buyer need to figure this out themselves. Here's the information I have available, and they'll go from there.
Perfect. And that FedEx envelope with the items that has to be, if it has to be notarized and things like that, when is that due to go back to you? When does the seller have to send it back to you?
That's a great question. So within the terms of the contract itself, the paperwork is due back within 5 business days of your receipt.
Okay.
So, a lot of times no one's cracking the whip on that timeline, but it is in the contract, and we always let them know that's what it says.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the title prelim comes back, you know what I mean? You guys have checked, there's no liens, anything like that. And then, and we actually get a title report. So as agents, we also review it to make sure, that nothing has been missed or anything. And after that, go ahead, tell me what is.
So our pre-closing process.
Yes.
This is where if the buyer is financing the purchase, we're working in close contact with the lender to produce the loan documents. So the lender will reach out to escrow, from the beginning of the process, the opening process, all the way to the pre-closing process, and request conditions. They'll request financials to help build the lender's closing disclosure that the buyer needs to execute. So this pre-closing process includes that information, and then also our receipt once the buyer's loan is approved of their final loan documents.
Right.
And once those loan documents arrive, I would then review them to make sure that they're accurate, making sure that the names are spelled correctly and that the property address is correct, as we don't want to have the buyer sign incorrect documents.
Right.
And then, assuming everything checks out, we will reach out to the buyer to arrange a mobile notary service to meet with them, either here when COVID allows us to have people back in the office, or we would send a mobile notary out to them. And then once the loan documents are signed, we send them back to the lender based upon their qualifications. Some require the documents to be emailed. Some require live documents to be sent by FedEx or by courier, depending on their location. Some don't require them at all. So just depending on the lender's specific needs, we will follow their funding requirements. And then we will work with the buyer to make sure that they are arranging the delivery of their closing funds at this time, or their down payment, as it's called.
Okay. And now I know there is, and you have to correct me, but I know there is a 3 days for the loan, right? After they get the documents, I believe they have maybe the buyer has 3 days.
So that process is in the pre-closing. once the buyer is issued something called a closing disclosure from their lender with all of the finalized charges.
Yes.
Once the buyer acknowledges receipt of that document from the lender, they can then sign loan documents 3 days after.
After, exactly. Yeah. Okay. But once the documents have been signed and it has been notarized, pretty much it's up to the lender to fund it, you know what I mean, as quickly as possible, right?
That's right.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and then and that's pretty much closing, correct? And
yeah. So the closing process is basically once the loan is funded, we set the file up to record with the county recorder's office. We then formalize close of escrow once the deed is recorded. And then it's payday for our sellers. We then finalize the closing statement. I receive monies from our title partner once they've made any mortgage lien payoffs. And then we get to send the money to our clients and disperse the funds and issue our final closing documents.
And that fund after the closing could take, obviously there has to be final recording. Otherwise, officially, the buyer doesn't own the house yet. But the final closing has to be done. And normally, a lot of times that recording is either first thing in the morning or it's in the afternoon. There's 2 times a day, if I understand, that the recorder's office can record. And then to get the proceeds, sometimes it could take, a couple of days after close of escrow for the seller to receive the proceeds. Is that correct?
Sure. So I'll touch on first the recording. If you're recording a property in Orange County, the county recorder records all day. We just have to set the file up. No, that's fine. We have to set the file up by 3:30 for it to record that same day. Properties out of Orange County, like in Los Angeles County, they only record at 8 a.m. in the morning. So there are, there's 2 types of recordings, those that do all day, which is most of Southern California, and then Los Angeles and some of our Northern California partners, they require just one, 8 a.m. recording a day. And as far as the proceeds, once the file is closed, the next business day, we typically have all of our financials dialed in because I'll impress upon our title company the importance of getting our money back from them so I can wire it to the seller if that's their request. So usually by the next business day, we would have proceeds out either by check or wire, whatever the seller had requested.
Okay, perfect. And then if it's closing falls on, I know that this happens, and as agents, we make, we do our best not to have a closing on, official holiday or business holiday. But just tell us what happens with the recording, since the recorder's office, escrow office is not open on a holiday. Yeah.
So in the event that the closing date, as we schedule it in the early on process, falls on either a weekend or a county recorder holiday, the closing would roll to the next business day.
There we go.
Right. And specific to a question that I'm sure would be asked by your viewers, in the event we record escrow on a Friday, the disbursement wouldn't be made until Monday. So net proceeds wouldn't be available until, again, the next business day, but that would be a Monday, given a Friday closing.
There we go. Okay, perfect. And we can go really quickly over, the buyer side of things. I think you covered a lot of it in terms of the buyers. I think the only thing is some of the costs, and it's not necessarily escrow items, but it is lender, the points they have to pay, some of those costs, or, the interest that they, if it's paid, HOA that has to be prorated and things like that. If you can just brush on that, that would be great.
Sure. So just to fill in some of the gaps, because we did kind of bounce between buyer and seller during that process. Initially, the buyer, as we start the escrow process together, after they've deposited their earnest money deposit outside of escrow, they're going to work with their realtor, their inspector, and their lender kind of off of my desk, outside of our involvement to, facilitate their terms, do their inspections, make sure everything's good, and ultimately release their contingencies. As we work with their lender, the closing disclosure will be provided to them, and that closing disclosure will have all of the prorations that you discussed. any lender charges or points that they've agreed to pay. Right. And it's super important that buyers understand that when they are reviewing this closing disclosure, that they review it in detail. And we, as an escrow partner, I can't speak to the lender's actual costs. They are what they are. But if a buyer ever has questions, they're always free to give me a ring, or forward me a copy of it by email and have me review it. And I can let you know if there's something askew or something, something to ask if it doesn't look right. We all make mistakes. Sometimes there'll be a proration that's wrong, or they'll have a seller charge that should be a buyer charge. And we can help highlight those to make sure that the buyer is acknowledging an accurate disclosure.
There we go. Sometimes I always tell my clients, we're all human.
Yeah, we are.
Be really accurate, and we are. 99% of the time we are, but we're still human. So things will happen.
For sure.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Christopher. I think this will help a lot of consumers, buyers, sellers, and
my pleasure.
This definitely will shed a lot of light on it. So I appreciate your time, and
of course,
you know that I love working with you just because you're so responsive quickly, and so really appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. Thank you for having me today. This was a lot of fun.
Take care. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.